What's up, Pitt? How you doing?
Good, good. Welcome.
Thank you, buddy. You
No,
didn't
so
tell me. So I was on your Instagram page. You didn't tell me you were on Washed Up Pitt. So
I know. I'm sorry. A little confusion there. I wanted to
it's
do
okay.
everything just from this account.
It's okay. Would you rather me do it on mine? I don't know how to do it, but I can. I can do it. Or can we go feed on both? Live feed on
Uh,
both?
so it should your followers should get the notification that you are going live, and I think if they click on like your little icon like you did with mine, it should take us to both of them.
Great. That's all we know. Tyler Brazelton's in the house.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He's
So
a stud second baseman. Rakes.
So like Instagram Live, it has like the little people joining right there. They can wave and then they can comment. So I was hoping maybe do like 25, 27 minutes and then leave the rest if someone has any questions, if we still have followers by
Oh,
then.
we can do hours and hours and hours if you want. It doesn't matter to me.
Awesome, awesome. I could talk baseball all day, but for anyone who just joining or doesn't know, I wanted to save the video at the end. Just post it to my links just so everyone can see it. But Todd Jones, 16 MLB seasons, just a little background. Eight different teams, 319 saves, only 30 players can say that they're in that 300 club, so that puts you with very elite company. And Jacksonville State, former first-round pick, and 3 years ago you were coaching in the minors with Detroit. So welcome.
Right.
Thank you for joining me and my blog.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. This is a great idea, and you're never washed up in my eyes for sure.
Thank you, Fu Man. And if, for everyone watching, if I call you Fu Man, it's his PS Network name. So we've kind of gotten used to the Fu Man handle.
So for the internet world, Chris Petto, when he's not blogging and being an internet sensation, he is dominating people on Fortnite. So FuMan59 is my gamer tag. If anybody is interested in watching me get shot pretty quick in the game. So the frustrating part is my son, Average Jones 3, and you and JP and a bunch of the boys, they all let me play together, but they all get really frustrated when I get killed really quick. So I do appreciate you guys letting me play, and always look forward to that.
Absolutely. We got to protect the Fu Man at all costs. So
That's
we got to
right.
get you the dub.
That's right. That's right.
So going into more baseball, one of the interesting things more about your journey was kind of the transition from player to coach. And it's interesting because of the different eras that you played in, from the late 90s, early 2000s, that kind of that hardball era, into this more, new age analytical, looking at different numbers. So like my first question would be like, with all the new numbers, how all the new information we're processing, how are pitchers pitching differently from back then to now? From when you think.
I'm not really sure that it's very much different. I think the one thing, Chris, that's really changed a lot in this game is the timing of all the information changing hands. Because when I first got to the major leagues in 1993, you had 2 months in the season before anybody ever even knew that you had a new pitch, or you had a changeup, or you like to throw lefties away to get them out. And as I was continuing to play, even up in the 2000s and 2005 and 6 and 7, those seasons, that gap started to shrink, and information was changing hands a lot faster, because there was an old adage that you could change leagues every 2 or 3 years, and people wouldn't have any information on you because they didn't even scout the other leagues as much. So, but probably the back half of my career, I was in this transitional phase of not a lot of weight room stuff early in my career, to everybody had their own strength guy, and strength and dietary and conditioning became at a premium because players started to make a lot of money, and they were really starting to realize that you had to hang around the game as long as you could, because the last 4 years of your career was going to be when you made the most money. So if you could extend that, you could make more money in your
I
career.
see.
So having said all that, there was this perfect storm of, you know, of lifting and then dietary stuff and then scouting reports, and all kind of was in my era. And then when I left, you know, 2001, 2002 was kind of when, you know, Billy Beane started in Oakland with the
Mm-hmm.
analytics. And then they had a few good years. They had Tim Hudson, Mark Mulder, and Barry Zito, which really helped
Mm-hmm.
them out. But they won 21 games in a row one year in 2001 and got to the playoffs and all this stuff. So other organizations started to try to follow what the Indians were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, what the A's were doing. And
Right.
this is the birth of the analytics. And over the last, you know, 10 or 15 years now, you're starting to see a focus on a premium for information, because really there's not, I don't think there is, you know, 30 number one starting pitchers in the major leagues.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think every team has a legitimate number one. There's only probably 15 or, you know, 20 guys that are number one guys, and they're either really young and haven't been paid yet, or they're Garrett Cole and they just got $350 million. So
Absolutely.
that makes it really difficult for clubs to be able to keep those kind of players around. So having said that, there's a lot of clubs that started to say, hey, instead of having one $30 million player, why don't we just get three $10 million players that can throw up 200 innings and have 2-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio, get guys out, and you know, go get some hitters and see what happens. So, but the good clubs nowadays are able to afford everything. So back to your question, I don't think the way pitchers pitch has changed a whole lot. I just think the information is now so specific on every pitcher and every hitter that
Mm-hmm.
instead of like trying to guess what these guys can do, you just know exactly what they try to do and you just try to make pitches as best you can.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what changes, because the information is instant now. You can
Mm-hmm.
go out and at the end of a series, you can realize this guy's got a new pitch, or he hits the ball the other way right now very well, or something like that. So that's what's really changed, has been the speed of the information changing hands.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you know, the one thing that you know, it really is kind of going into is it's making smarter hitters and pitchers. You know what I mean? It's everyone, you know, kind of continue developing. You know, it's not just saying, okay, I'm gonna be that thrower. You know, it's saying, okay, what can I do here, here, and here? When, you know, a lot of the times when I was pitching, it was I'm listening straight to the catcher. You know, but now it's giving the information to the actual pitchers to know and decide, you know, what they can throw, you know, in different counts and what, you know, guys have more tendencies to do.
Yeah, but then you know what? There starts this generation's of pitchers slippery slopes,
Mm-hmm.
because pitchers now, they're so focused on information and so
Mm-hmm.
focused on hitting a specific part of the strike zone that they forgot. Sometimes you get caught up in the information and you forget what got you to the big leagues, or what got you your contract, or what got you your scholarship in college,
Mm-hmm.
because you're thinking too much. So there's a balance between being able to take that information and use it to your advantage, but then also realize that you're a pretty good pitcher too.
Mm-hmm.
And even though they know what's coming at this particular count, they still have to hit it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very difficult. So I imagine nowadays, and in the minor leagues, when I was coaching, there was a little bit of that, because there was, like, the information was starting to trickle down.
Mm-hmm.
There's these information things called, you know, TrackMan, and in the major leagues, there's this big, you know, square that's sitting up behind home plate that's a $5 million project, and it analyzes everything. So they've put one of those in every park in the minor leagues now. And
Mm-hmm.
information is starting to change hands in the minor leagues as quickly as it is when I first, about the middle part of my career, in the big leagues.
Mm-hmm.
So guys are getting exposed in the minor leagues much faster than they ever did.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where you become, learning to be a pitcher and making adjustments. Because
Hmm.
if you can't make adjustment pit, I mean,
Yeah, you're not gonna last.
if you can't
Hmm.
make adjustments based on what you have going that day and who you're facing and a bunch of these different circumstances, you're never going to
Hmm.
survive. So that was kind of my emphasis in the minor leagues when I was coaching, was to help these guys establish who they were as a pitcher, and
Hmm.
learn that most of the time I'm going to stick right there. But if I can get beat, if it's a situation where there's second and third and one out, and there's a really good contact hitter hitting, maybe I can pitch around him, go get the next guy, or go to his weakness. And
Hmm.
then, but just balancing that, learning when to stick with your strengths and when to go to their weaknesses is really the difficult thing nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in a game that, already makes you want to lose your mind. You throw in all these numbers and it could just, cloud your mind even
Absolutely.
more.
Bro, you're all over it. Absolute guys. Listen, I mean, we've all played with guys that had all this information, and then
Hmm.
they kind of forgot what to do, and all of a sudden, what you could do since you were 5 years old, you can't do anymore.
Hmm.
And
Absolutely.
so learning how to get out of that rabbit hole and
Hmm.
make things go back to making it simple
Hmm.
is how you can get out of those ruts. But it's hard to do because in the major leagues you get exposed. Everything's on TV, everything's on social media. You have to deal with your friends giving you a hard time, or you have to
Hmm.
deal with the public part of getting rocked in the big leagues is no fun. So you got to learn how to do that too.
Absolutely. I mean, back in the day, I figured, you can kind of get away from it, just, your local newspapers and then, ESPN, maybe that was about it. But now you get home,
Absolutely.
you go to Twitter and it's just, you have 1,000 critics, million critics coming at you, when back in the day you can kind of get away from it. So that's like a big change that's happened. But, it's important to note that, like you said, the guys are there in the minors, they're there because they have the stuff already, and it's using that analytics to help them become better and utilizing that information, the good information, to try and make yourself better. It's a
Exactly
game
right.
of, it's a game of 27 outs. However, you can get those 27 outs, that's all you care about, and getting the win.
The analytics in the minor leagues is a little bit more important because you're developing guys than
Hmm.
it is in the major league. You use the analytics in the major leagues to identify weaknesses in swings or weaknesses in pitch selection or things like that. But in the minor leagues, you can use analytics really in a different way because, say, for instance, you know, uh, a guy has trouble with his slider. If you can
Hmm.
use the analytics and film him with the super slow mo film, you can see that his arm won't even go through and make that pitch. That maybe a curveball would be better to teach him instead of a
Hmm.
slider, just because of the way his body works, just because of the way his arm works. You can speed up the development process for these minor league prospects, and they can really start to identify quicker who they are and what they need to do to get better. Because if I'm trying to teach a guy that is a down here a sidearm guy, I'm trying to teach him a curveball. That's where I'm an idiot.
Hmm.
I've got to realize that I've got to give him a chance to succeed, and that's where these analytics really come into play, because the analytics help you identify what your eyeballs already see.
Hmm.
Because you have to be able to see something, to be able to look up the numbers to see if the number, or your Kevin Youkilis or Griffey, where I'm an idiot.
Hmm.
I've got to realize that I've got to give him a chance to succeed, and that's where these analytics really come into play, because the analytics help you identify what your eyeballs already see.
Hmm.
Because you have to be able to see something, to be able to look up the numbers to see if the numbers bear it out.
Hmm.
And if the numbers bear it out, then you're able to see that your eyes were correct, and you're able to quantify it. So
Hmm.
that's what the analytics is all about nowadays, and it really helps. It helps in player development, and it helps when you get to the big leagues. It helps in execution of a scouting report.
Okay, so there's two sides to that, but that's something I didn't know. That's awesome. And like you said about the body movement, the physical body, it's I love baseball because it's a sport where you can have any type of body type and and still be successful. The numbers aren't gonna lie. And
Exactly right.
you know what I mean? And it's like you said, you can't if your body isn't physically built to throw a Justin Verlander, slider, then why are you gonna try and teach someone to throw, to throw that pitch, And would a solution to that be looking at other pitchers' numbers and arm angles and stuff like that that have similar body types to the
Pro-
person?
uh, Probably so, but you'd have to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. Just because he's a right-handed starter, see, because that's something that's really changed from when
Mm-hmm.
I was playing to when it is now. Because all we had were the eyes, and there were certain pitchers that threw similar curveballs to me,
Mm-hmm.
or a cutter later in my career. I could go and talk to them and ask them about, hey, how do you hold your cutter, things like that. But with the analytics, you can have a right-handed pitcher that's got the same stuff, but his hips are way more flexible than yours, like a Tim Lincecum, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And even though
Yeah.
Tim Lincecum we had similar curveballs. For me to try
Mm-hmm.
to talk to him about how to pitch would be silly, because his spine flexibility and his hip range of motion are
Mm-hmm.
are a completely different animal than I was. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where the analytics nowadays, you can really get specific and find out guys that do exactly what you do, and then go
Mm-hmm.
over there, find them in batting practice, and talk to them about, hey, how do you hold your curveball? What are you thinking about when you get guys on the bases? How are you doing this? And
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that really helps, because guys that have been walking through the same fires can exchange notes, and they can let people know what helped them get through their situations.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Everyone's body is going to be different, and like I keep thinking, to the Moneyball reference of, when I don't know if you see, Kevin Youkilis is in it and they look at his batting stance and it's like you would just look at it with the eye test and, this guy is, not something you're looking for, but in the end, everyone comes to the same exact path, same exact
Perfect.
motion. So it's, you
Perfect.
know what I mean?
Whether you're Gary Sheffield, or you're Kevin Youkilis or Griffey Jr.,
Mm-hmm.
once they get their weight off their back leg, and that bat's
Mm-hmm.
coming through the zone, it's all the same. It's the
It's all the
same
same
thing with a
thing.
same thing with a pitcher, whether you're Clayton Kershaw or Justin Verlander.
Mm-hmm.
When his front foot hits the slope of the mound, and that arm is right where it should be, there
Mm-hmm.
it's all the same.
It's all
Everybody
the same.
everybody you can superimpose everybody on top of each other, and they're very, very, very similar.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the real time adjustment from the for the the analytics is something that in college it's something we've never done. Unfortunately, we just didn't have the type of technology to do it. And
Right.
what I liked was the fact that you can pitch. It's from pitch to pitch, so you can see how you're throwing, where your arm angle's coming from. Any type of spin movement. Go back, look at the information, look what you did, and then you can make the adjustment pitch by pitch instead of kind of the old school method was your coach gives you a bunch of drills to do. You come back a week later and you're still having the same problems. You really can't understand where you're going wrong. It's nice to see the actual facts, on the actual paper.
Right. I mean, nowadays there is, and that's another thing that's really interesting, because one thing with analytics from the coach's standpoint is I can present you information that is
Mm-hmm.
almost third party information. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not a personal attack of me, what I think that you can't do. I'm just showing you these numbers, because these numbers are panning out, that
Mm-hmm.
you do different things in the different situations, and these numbers bear it. So it
Mm-hmm.
isn't me having like, oh, coach doesn't like me, or what does he know? He doesn't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm handing you this information that all of baseball's got.
Yeah.
And it says right here that 17% of the time, you when it gets to be a 2-1 count, you throw a fastball.
Mm-hmm.
So you go over to your batting average when it's 2-1, and the league's hitting 490. off of you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can get the hitter or that pitcher to understand that those two numbers connect,
Mm-hmm.
then he can make an adjustment and say, oh, okay, now I need to do something different. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where the analytics really help us as a coach, because we're able to present the information to a player in a non-threatening way, because
Mm-hmm.
all we want to do is really just help you get this
Make
guy
them get
out.
better. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But when you get to a 2-1 count, the entire league knows that you're going to throw a fastball.
Mm-hmm.
And what is any type of hitter? What is his batting average? How much you think it goes up when he knows what's coming?
A lot.
You know what I mean? So
It's, yeah. Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where the information is really, really helpful in 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 that regard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like like I said, making that smarter pitcher, making that smarter hitter, knowing, okay, this is going to be, most likely what's coming, giving them, the better advantage for it. It's
Yeah.
something's definitely interesting. Would you? I was reading about something today, and it said, I forgot who said it. It was on Instagram, but it was someone said Jeter wouldn't have made it in the type of like environment we are now. Like he would have made it later in his career. Like, do you believe that some players wouldn't make it now based on the numbers we're looking at? Certain players.
I think maybe as a general broad stroke,
Mm-hmm.
there would be some players that played in my era that might have a tougher time nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But the elite, don't ever forget this: the elite
Mm-hmm.
players, the
Will
elite
always.
Derek Jeter would have made the adjustment.
Oh, trust me, I will.
You
I
know
will
what I'm
back
saying?
Jeter no matter 100%.
Yeah, and like we used to get there. So there's a broadcaster for the Baltimore Orioles, and his name is Jim Palmer, and
Mm-hmm.
he's a Hall of Famer. And when I was coming through, there was this 5 or 6 year window where they were adjusting the strike zone. Right, the
Mm-hmm.
umpires were all trying to get unified. They were trying to shrink the strike zone and raise it up and down to
Mm-hmm.
back in the 70s. And because back in the 70s, all the pitchers back then used the strike zone up and down. And back when I first got up, the strike zone had shrunk but gotten a little
Mm-hmm.
wider. So we were
In
just
and
doing
out.
this.
Mm-hmm.
We were going in and out. But
Mm-hmm.
so we had this talk with Jim Palmer. Would you be able to get people out now? And he's like, you don't think I can make the adjustment
Mm-hmm.
from throwing up and down to going in and out? I mean, do you
Mm-hmm.
guys not think I could have done that? But and that's the thing. So every generation, the game is constantly changing.
Mm-hmm.
But the premier elite guys will always find a way
To
to
rise to it.
stick and adjust. And they may miss Jeter might not have gotten called up as early because his analytics on the infield. I mean, he made 59 errors one year in A-ball.
Mm-hmm.
But his ability would have carried him through to where
Mm-hmm.
he would have played the exact same time, because he's a special player.
Absolutely.
But I do think that it cuts both ways, because I think there could be some pitchers that pitch now where they just pitch to the report. They don't have any feel. They don't have any
Mm-hmm.
comprehension of what the hitter's trying to do. They're just going to execute. They're just target guys. And,
Mm-hmm.
there's a little bit of both of that you need to have, but, you can't be one or the other. So you have to be able to adjust. And that's ultimately what anything in the big leagues or anything in baseball is all about. It's
Mm-hmm.
just about making adjustments from pitch to pitch. And then the higher you go, the higher level you keep going, your room
Mm-hmm.
for error gets a lot smaller. And
Smaller
then,
and smaller.
when you get exposed, it's public. There's nowhere to run. And then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people's heads explode. I've had that in my career where my head's exploded many times, and it took me months and months and months to recover. But
Mm-hmm.
you have to pick up your pieces and and move on and keep going forward. And that's kind of the beauty of it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, game of failure, you got to keep going. Um, one of the things, you and me were talking about, and, we mentioned it, we texted, and you said that cavern that once existed between like college and pro ball is gone. The contacts will help you go forward, but, the analytics is really the future. What do you mean, like, by that cavern that that we were talking about?
Okay, when I was playing, I was talking to you about the cavernous, broad gap between coaches that coach in college versus coaches that coach in pro ball.
In pro ball. Mm-hmm.
And with this new wave of generation, it's almost like the tails wagging the dog, because there was, I'll never forget this. We were in a discussion in spring training with the Tigers, and it was our first round draft pick. His name was Matt Manning. He signed for $7.5 million out of high school.
Mm-hmm.
So after the Tigers give him the money and he shows up to spring training, he's got this a little bit of a different throwing program, like a Trevor Bauer. Trevor Bauer always has a different throwing program. Matt Manning kind of had a little bit of the same things, but some of it was very different. And there was great concern on the Tigers side of it to say, wow, we gave this kid all this money. We should have control over his throwing program and things like that. But then there was another discussion that says, look, he was the first round draft pick on this throwing program. His body and his arm and his muscles are used to this throwing program. Do we not mess with it at all? Do we just let him show us what he's doing? And then ultimately the Tigers kind of chip in and fill in the gaps with his throwing program. And that's ultimately what the Tigers did. Give him credit, because if you give a high school kid $7.5 million, you're going to assume that he doesn't know how to do anything, and you're going to help him, make his way to the big leagues as fast as you can. So the Tigers said, okay, show us what you're doing. And this one particular player specifically had a really good feel for his throwing program, so the Tigers left it alone. And so that's kind of what you're seeing now. Is you're seeing influences from high school, like his high school coach helped him come up with this program. And then you see these colleges, these high school coaches now are becoming college coaches, because the transition is just getting smaller and smaller because the information is exchanging back and forth. So now you're seeing the Minnesota Twins right now. Their major league pitching coach was at Arkansas State or someplace as a pitching coach there. And then this past offseason, the New York Yankees hired a guy that Alex is going to work for, He's a pitching guru down in South Florida. So, and he ran an indoor facility. So, and now he's the Yankees pitch shaping guy. So there's a lot of things that are just hybriding, and it's easier for people to break down that barrier of the old buttoned up old timey scouts and coaches to say, well, you don't know what it's like in pro ball, because all that's out the window, because you're starting to see, look at LSU's pitching coach. LSU's pitching coach right now was a bullpen coach in the big leagues for the Orioles. And he's been LSU's pitching coach for the last 7, 8, 10 years, but he left pro ball and went to college. So it's going both ways.
That's what.
And just because the information, because of what's required out of you guys in college nowadays, is so much more than it ever was when I was in college. Because you gotta worry about secondary command, and you got to worry about varying your times with runners on first base and things like that. And none of that information was there when I was in college. It wasn't until AA until I was taught about all that stuff. So everything's sped up. You're starting to see 10-year-olds with a throwing program, with a hitting guy, with a pitching guy, with a strength guy. And, because there's such an opportunity for, if you're a good player, to just keep moving.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and it's interesting you mentioned that with the it was Eric Cressy they hired, and Matt Blake, two guys. Matt Blake, didn't have a lot of major league experience, but he worked with guys like Bauer and Clevenger, and you could see the praise and the difference of where they came from to where they're at now. And that's what one of the things they liked. And the fact that Matt Blake is able to interpret that information and spit it back out to the players, to help them, and it's useful. And I don't know if you heard Rob Hill. He's the Dodgers pitching coordinator,
Yeah.
and he's only 24 years old, and he didn't finish college baseball. He went to Driveline back when it wasn't really, as big as it is now. And, he did it. He learned all the information. But one thing that made him, really good about it is that he did it himself, and he worked the process to where he built his arm up to like he was like low 90s, and
Right.
he wanted to, he in his mind, he wanted to show that, I don't think he would have earned the respect of the players, coming in 24 years old as, a pitching coordinator, not having to gone through the work and, seen the results actually work, So I think that was, like you said, the cavern is, if you know how to interpret the information, you're going to be, you have that baseball knowledge, you're going to be useful to any, pretty much anyone.
Yeah, but it takes a special person,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to be able to present it in a way, when you don't have a lot of a resume. Think
Mm-hmm.
about this. I mean, think about this. If a guy was in the military and he was going out to talk to the guys on the front line
Mm-hmm.
about how to stay alive, how to handle a platoon, how to protect your brother, but he never fought. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be difficult for the guys in the front line to even listen to what he has to say. So
Absolutely.
that coach has to be a special kind of coach to understand that he's got to earn the respect of the players, even before any of them are ever going to listen to him, because
Mm-hmm.
he's already convinced the front office, because that's a whole nother presentation. You've got to be able to present, in a business format, baseball, and that's very
Mm-hmm.
difficult. But then once you get the job, you've got to be able to present baseball in baseball terms. But you have to earn the respect of the players that are going to be listening to you, well, because it's their career.
Mm-hmm.
So what he has to do first is he's got to get to the ballpark super early. He's got to
Mm-hmm.
understand. He's got to establish relationships with these guys and some sort of rapport, so they can learn to trust him and learn to
Mm-hmm.
understand that he's just there to help. So
Mm-hmm.
it takes a special kind of coach to come out of that situation into a pro ball situation, let alone a big league level.
Mm-hmm.
Because the
Absolutely.
major league level because there's so much other stuff that goes on, he's got to earn that thing, but it can be done. You just
Mm-hmm.
have to have a special kind of coach that's willing to just put in the time. Just
Mm-hmm.
put in the time. Just keep hanging around. Hey, want to go throw? Hey, how you doing? Hey, let's go to lunch. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
let's go lift. Let's go for a run. I mean, you've got to establish. You have to establish personal relationships with the players at any level to be a good coach, to understand that,
Mm-hmm.
so the players will say, wow, this guy really cares about me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. No. And in Hill's case, he worked with Alex Wood. And Alex Wood, recommended him to Kenley Jansen, and Clayton Kershaw. And when you have these big name guys saying, this works, this guy's legit. That's how you're going to form that relationship. And that's when I think it was, really great for him. And it was a really cool story that I read. I didn't know if you heard about
So
him.
that guy that got that job,
Mm-hmm.
he's obviously really, really good at that,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
because in order for Kenley Jansen and Clayton Kershaw to let you into their world, you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna have some. You have to be able to present information in a very special way, and that takes a very special kind of person. So hat
Mm-hmm.
so hats off to him, man, because that's a tough thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. No, his story, it's long and hardship, but this is, it was something he was doing 6 years ago when Driveline really wasn't that big, so it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But kind of going on to, we were talking a little bit about college baseball, and I'm trying to see coming, you know, the, in 2017, I read that, there's 302 NCAA baseball teams. Only 10 of them had someone on their staff, like specifically for analytics. Do you see this, trending more in the future? Are colleges able to have that um, availability to get a graduate assistant or someone like that just to look at and interpret the numbers for them?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think that's one thing, one part of college baseball that's really going to explode
Hmm.
because you can put the analytic uh, equipment in your stadium, and then you can host summer ball tournaments. You can bring high school kids in. You can
Hmm.
get them on your analytics machine, and you can study, you can scout, and you can evaluate high school players on your team.
Hmm.
And then when you're a smaller program, uh,
Hmm.
like a mid-range Division 1 or a Division 2 or a JUCO,
Hmm.
you can have the analytics at your ballpark. So when these scouts come to see your players, you've got the information that you can give to the scouts, and the scouts are able to talk apples to apples with your player
Hmm.
because they have the same analytical identification process in the college stadiums that they have in pro ball.
Hmm.
So it helps recruit from the high school side of it. It helps identify a ninth grader or a 10th grader that throws 82 miles an hour, right?
Hmm.
But his spin rate is crazy.
Hmm.
So that means that there's going to be more in that arm later on in life.
Hmm.
Whereas if they get a high school kid and he throws 82 miles an hour, but his spin rate is not that great, you know
Hmm.
that he's probably tapped out. So
Hmm.
that helps the recruiting process in high school, and then it helps transition your college players into pro ball. Well, because if you're not at a LSU or a Texas or a big program,
Hmm.
you've got the numbers to back up that, hey, I'm at Florida. Florida Southern's got a first baseman right now
Hmm. Yeah.
named Teeter that's going to be in the top 5 rounds because of what he did in the summer at the Cape, but then also his analytics, his launch angle and his bat tracks through the zones and things like that. They're off the
Hmm.
chart. Plus his
Hmm.
defense is amazing.
Hmm.
And the people at Florida Southern are able to hand that information to those pro scouts, and those pro scouts can run it up the chain of command and justify picking this guy in the 5th round.
Hmm.
So it helps. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's a major thing. The only thing is it's expensive. So
Yeah. Hmm.
there's all sort of thresholds of money that you can invest, but you can get a good system in for probably $35,000. But at a small school, that's expensive. So
Big time. Yeah.
you have to do some fundraising and things like that. But everybody in the SEC has it.
Hmm.
Everybody in the ACC has it. I imagine everybody in the Pac-12 has it, and it's just helping them with information, identify high school players to college, transitioning college players into pro ball, and then helping your program beat that guy that doesn't have the analytics.
Absolutely. It's such a major advantage for schools, not only recruiting, but, giving them that advantage, to have smarter players and win the game. Um, I remember, my junior year, we got a new pitching coach, Ben Jackson, and he comes into the staff and he's like, we're gonna have you. He brings in like 6 different sheets, and he was like, we're gonna start charting this, 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 and this, and we all had to learn the different charts. It was 0 counts, stuff like that, 1-0 counts, fastballs, stuff like that, different numbers, and it was really eye opening just to see, after the game you would look at it and you go, why was this guy successful? Why was this guy not bad? You look at it, 0 strikes, 1-0 strikes, falling behind, stuff like that. And that was just like little simple things that really helped us kind of learn where we were going wrong or where we were going right, and, kind of keep focusing on that.
Yeah, and it's a little bit different coaching in college. Uh, every level that you coach in, I've had the opportunity to coach in high school. I've had the opportunity to coach college kids, and I've
Hmm.
had the opportunity to coach pro ball. Um, you have to understand, every level kids are different. So a college kid, you have to make sure you have the right college kid to be able to present him, all this technical analytical stuff. Because if you'd given it to me in college, I wouldn't have been able to handle it, because I don't know where my front hip is. I don't know where my knee is. I don't know. I just pick that ball up and throw it.
Yeah.
So if you'd have given me that information, I don't know if it would have been able to help. But in college, you have to understand. So you measure that, right? You weigh it. Do I give this kid the information, or do I not give it to this kid because he'll go crazy once he gets behind the count, or he'll start to try to overthink because he's a thinker, he's a processor, things like that. So as a coach, you got to understand who can handle that information and who can't. And guys that can't, you can still give them information. You just don't waterboard them. You just don't give them everything. You give them a little bit at a time to try to help them, because it's all about, every information that you give them is correct, but if you give them too much, you're going to short them out. And that's not good coaching. So you have to understand what they can handle and what they can't.
Absolutely. I mean, they're definitely going to see it, down the line if they make it further, to get more of that information. So
right.
And it's funny. I picture, when I picture scouting, like back when I was in high school, it's, you look for the guy with the clipboard, the pen, and the radar gun. If you're not between this mile an hour and this mile an hour, then they pack up their stuff and leave. Is that different today? They're looking at, they looking more at like the Rapsodo numbers and the spin rate and all that more? It's for me, like, it's like projectability was really big when I was in high school. If you weren't like a big body, if you didn't pass the eye test, you were already getting knocked down, that one peg already.
Right. And that's the frustrating part of it, because there is an eye test. There is a prejudice that when I'm a scout for the Tigers, and I'm gonna call my scouting director, and I'm like, yo, you got to see this guy. He's amazing. He can locate. He's got arm side command. He's got glove side command. He can throw his breaking ball like you've never seen before. He competes. He's got his Sputinator's off the chart. He's got guts, and then he flies in, and he's 5'10". It's a different. It's the first thing that the guys see, right?
Yeah.
So everybody wants to be able to project the guy that's 6'6", because that way the pressure's not on you. You see it every night in the big leagues. When you go to the bullpen, they have Latin players that are able to throw 100 miles an hour, because they don't want to keep a guy that's that's got less stuff, but can really command pitches, because when he gives it up, it looks bad on the coach, it looks bad on the general manager. But when you're hitting off of a Aroldis Chapman, or you're hitting off any pitcher that throws 100 miles an hour, doesn't have to be a Latin guy. It can be, you can say, hey, give the hitter credit because he hit a ball that was 100 miles an hour. If you hit a home run off a guy throwing 90, like when I was closing the last 3 years of my career, I'd throw 90 to 95 miles an hour. And, when I would give up a home run on 91 mile an hour sinker, everybody would want to know with Jim Leland, why is this guy still your closer? This guy's terrible. He's awful. And so the easy thing is to cross your hands, sit behind the guy that's 6'7", and hope that he does well. That's easy coaching. So that's a little bit of a cop out. But unfortunately, in order to get noticed, there are some things that you have to kind of do to pass the initial eye test. And if you don't pass the initial eye test, that's okay. Yeah. But you have to do something else pretty special. And that's kind of, just because it's tough, because it's tough to keep moving up levels, because there's a lot of good players. And then when you get to the big leagues, you're dealing with players all over the world. So, just because, you're the best player in the SEC doesn't mean that doesn't translate that you're going to play in the big leagues, because you're dealing with everybody else. So that's
Absolutely.
that's the tough part.
Yeah, no, and it's, like looking at all the information from Rapsodo, I found it was interesting that there's a strong correlation between spin rate and swinging strike percentage than there is between velocity and swinging strike percentage, which I
That's
thought
right.
was really, which I thought was, really, interesting to look at.
So then translate that back into my day. We would always talk about a guy that threw 88 miles an hour, right? And he would throw it
Hmm.
right. He would throw it right by guys, and then other guys throwing 88 miles an hour would get murdered.
Hmm.
So what we didn't know was the guy that threw 88 miles an hour by guys had a little bit more spin rate, so his ball would stay on the same plane longer, and it would
Hmm.
kind of jump on the hitter. And that's what our eyes saw, but we didn't know what spin rate or anything was. But we just knew that
Hmm.
that guy he got away with a lot of stuff, and he only threw 88 miles an hour.
Hmm.
But that's what you're talking about. That's the spin rate thing, and that's kind of where you're starting to see an advantage with the analytics now.
Yeah, no, it's, they got true spin, the spin axis, the spin efficiency, and that the horizontal and vertical break, which, it's interesting to see. You can go on fan graphs and see, all the different, how the air pressures, affecting it and all that stuff. So it's really, cool stuff. I wish I had it, back in the day.
Yeah,
You
the
know,
the spin axis is we use that in we've got a Rapsodo in high school,
oh
and
wow.
we're able to show the high school kids that if you have a spin rate on an axis like this, that's
Hmm.
no good. That you want an axis, you want it being up and down, you don't want it on the side. And
Hmm.
that's what a spin axis is. You picture a baseball, and you just put
Hmm.
a pin through it, and that's the axis. So this is a perfect curveball axis, and then this is a
Hmm.
slider axis, and then over
Okay.
here would be a sinker
Hmm.
or a changeup, and then that's your
Hmm.
that's your fastball with two strikes. And
Hmm.
if you can show that to a kid, then he can understand. Wow, I just need to get behind the ball instead of I'm on the side of the ball. Because when
Hmm.
I'm on the side of the ball, that's when my spin axis is bad and I'm rushing or I'm flying open. But
Hmm.
if my hand is behind the ball, then I'm able to get a true spin rate and true spin axis. And that's
Absolutely.
what you want.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it would have been nice because, I was a big changeup guy, and, you know, I feel like the changeup is a dying pitch just because, it wasn't always comfortable to hold like in my hand.
Yeah,
So,
it's hard to learn.
you know what I mean? So I messed around with the grip a little bit, and then sometimes I would get it, down and in, and sometimes it would cut, and, I never really understood or like realized, how much, potentially where my hand was, where the ball was tilting would affect the movement. It would have been nice to know, okay, here, I feel that, and I can repeat that over and over again to get that movement that I wanted.
And that's something that the analytics would be able to instantly show you, that
Right
even
there.
though even though it was a good pitch down the strike zone, and every pitching coach in America is going to say that's it, that's the good one, you can go back
Hmm.
and look at the analytics and say, yeah, but my axis was still this way, it's terrible, it's got to be this way.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
especially,
that's
learning
that's
new
another that's
pitches.
another advantage. Yes, yeah,
Learning new pitches, it's, you're trying out new pitches, you throw this, the catcher looks at you, goes, "Hey, that was pretty good. Do that again." You're like, "I have no idea what I just did."
exactly
But you
right.
can look back at the data and say, "Okay, this was here, the ball was here, spin rate was that," and just try and keep, copying that. And that's something I definitely missed, you know, growing up. But
and
uh,
and that was one big advantage we had, Chris, because we had in the in the big leagues, even without the analytics, the spins and things like that, we had pitching
hmm.
coaches that really were good at picking up that kind of stuff, and
Hmm.
they were able to kind of bridge the gap for us and understand that he couldn't show it to us digitally, but he could show it to us on camera. And
Hmm.
a perfect example, when I was in Cincinnati, all the pitching coach said was, "You're here when you're bad. You're here when you're good. Just stay here."
Hmm.
And he could stand behind me when I was throwing my bullpen and making sure that I was getting down through, and I could feel that. But when I was here,
Hmm.
he would just go like, "See," and then I could feel it, and then I was able to
Hmm.
correct it and stay behind the ball, and that's where the the good pitching coaches really helped bridge that gap. But
Hmm.
for a guy that didn't have a good pitching coach, or the pitching coach really didn't think that was important, that's a tough thing to overcome for sure.
Hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I still remember the baseballs they used to make back in the day, and it was like color coded, and each one, if you threw it correctly, would show the color of which ball was coming. So,
Yeah, that's right.
little stuff like that to help you out. It's easier translated on that thing instead of seeing the colored ball. But um, do you think it's easier for like an older player to kind of reinvent themselves with the new analytics nowadays? Seeing how they can adjust things later in their career just because when they don't have, that stuff that they used to
I
have.
mean, I think you'd have to say 100% yes. Look at
Hmm.
Garrett Cole and Verlander.
Hmm.
Look at what Verlander was able to do when the Astros saw something that the Tigers didn't. Um, and then when the Pirates traded Garrett Cole to Houston, they showed him how to use his four seam up, his
Hmm.
fastball up in the zone, and that made him a completely different pitcher. And so that's kind of the discussion within the industry now. Is
Hmm.
it is it's interesting to see what clubs emphasize what as far as analytics,
Hmm.
because obviously the Pittsburgh Pirates, it's not like they didn't want him to do good.
Hmm.
They just didn't emphasize spin rate, or maybe they didn't emphasize fastballs up in the zone. They wanted to get him down with sinkers and sliders, and
Hmm.
that wasn't the best fit for him.
Hmm.
And once the Astros notified that or saw that, they made the trade for him and they identified it. Then they were able to present it to Garrett, and Garrett gave it a chance. And his numbers, he's not the same pitcher. He's
Hmm.
he
Absolutely.
he's amazing. So I would say 100% yes. I would
Hmm.
say that you could. I would say the only thing that you would run into now is when is enough enough?
Hmm. Yeah.
Because you can always tinker and you can always mess around, but you've got to learn when's enough is enough.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's funny because I think of Sonny Gray on the Yankees, and I remember listening to a podcast with CC and Sonny Gray was on, and he talks about how he knew what was wrong, but the Yankees just didn't have the system in place to show him the numbers, to help him out. And then once he went to Cincinnati, he went back to his old pitching coach that I think he had with Vandy, and he helped him use that information to kind of get back on track, and he started getting better, which it's interesting to see. And I think that's when the Yankees kind of made that overall shift to kind of go really big into analytics.
Yeah, and also don't ever forget this, Chris, and this is never going to show up on an analytical page,
Hmm.
but there's something different about pitching in a big market versus pitching in Cincinnati. I'm just I'm
Absolutely.
just I'm just telling you.
Yeah, no.
uh,
Mm.
because you know how, as a Yankee fan, you see that. You see Randy Johnson come to New York and not be able to perform.
Hmm. Yeah.
You see big free agents that are great players that for whatever reason can't get it done in New York, and it's different. I'm just telling you that it's different in Boston. It's different in New York.
Hmm.
It's different in Philadelphia than it is pitching in San Diego.
Hmm.
Than it is pitching in Anaheim or Texas, or the Florida Marlins, or something like that, because there's so much media scrutiny, media pressure in New York and Boston and Philly that's
Hmm.
just not anywhere else in America. Maybe even in LA. I mean, LA's got the same amount of papers, but there's so many other things going on in LA that
Hmm.
the Dodgers are kind of like, everybody will check in on them and keep an eye on them, but they're not going to
Hmm.
live and die them the way they do on the East Coast. It just doesn't happen.
Absolutely. No, I mean, being a Yankee fan, you expect, perfection every year. And, that's why I think Garrett Cole is going to be such a great Yankee, just because he grew up, knowing the expectations, knowing what it took to play in that city. And, I think it was just the perfect fit for him.
I had a chance to play with some guys that got some big deals. And obviously, I didn't play with anybody that got the 10-year, $370 million deal that he got.
Hmm.
But there is an adjustment period. I don't care
Hmm.
who you are. I don't care who you are. that the fans have to understand that it's going to take some time for him to get comfortable, because it's natural when you go out there. Every single time Garrett Cole goes out there, he wants to justify, or he wants to earn his money, because he
Mm-hmm.
cares. He cares about doing well. He wants to win. He wants to perform. And sometimes you put a little pressure on yourself, and everything that you used to see as black and white, now a little bit of it's gray, and you
Mm-hmm.
can't explain what's going on. So it just takes a transition. It just takes good teammates around you to be able to walk you through, because New York is a different kind of city, because they take shots at the players, but they do it one at a time. So
Mm-hmm.
there will be a there will be a cycle during the week, and it'll be all about CC Sabathia, or all about Jeter, or all about Sheffield, or something like that. And then they'll move on to the next guy.
Mm-hmm.
So for a new guy that's coming into that, and he's got to have good teammates around him that can help insulate him and help him through those tough